Welcome to Hearing What Matters, a podcast for Australians looking to know more about their hearing health, hearing loss and hearing aids. My name is V. Tran, host of your podcast. I do work for Active Audiology, an independent clinic in Melbourne, and my purpose with this podcast is to deliver information that is controversial, independent, honest, for those looking to improve their hearing health knowledge and make informed decisions. Welcome to Hearing What Matters. Now, WorkSafe is a government body that we know to ensure that our workplace is a safe one, but its other function is to compensate us if we sustain a workplace injury. Now, hearing loss can be an injury, and WorkSafe can possibly also fund our hearing aids where applicable. Now, the process can be complicated or not. And today we've got Lukas from Zaparas Lawyers to give us an expert insight of what's involved. Lukas, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Lukas, now tell us a little bit about what you do with WorkSafe and in the hearing injury area with Zaparas Lawyers.
Sure. So I'm a law clerk with Zaparas Lawyers. I've been with them for about 2.5 years now. And I handle a lot of the hearing loss claims and just make it easier process for people to get what they are potentially entitled to.
Lukas, why do so many people hesitate with making a WorkSafe claim, even if they've been told they could be eligible for it and have all their hearing aids funded?
So one of the common misconceptions that we see and feel is that people may think that the money for payments for hearing aids, etc., may be coming out of the pocket of the employer. However, that's not the case. The employers have work cover insurers, and the insurers who are underwritten by the WorkSafe governing body are there to act on behalf of the employer to assist with the payments for hearing aids and any sort of other expenses and other entitlements that one might have.
So if you're saying to me my employer isn't going to pay for it directly, would he or she be thinking that I am getting a handout? I just don't want that impression that I'm asking for something that is going to make them think that I am seeking a handout.
At the end of the day, they shouldn't have to fear that, they might be frowned upon perhaps. As I said, the insurer is there to look after the injured worker, but also they're there for looking after for the employer as well.
And when you say an injured worker, so what type of injury are we talking about? I normally think of people on a construction site getting physically injured, but how does a hearing loss classify itself as an injury?
Yep. So basically, yes, an injury can be physical, can be psychological. With respect to a hearing loss claim, as long as somebody can show that they have been working in a industrial environment for a number of years, exposure to loud noises, throughout the course of the day, over a long period of time can.
So, like, what type of industry would you typically see your clients from?
Yeah. So we get a lot of people who work in factories, for example. So they're around loud machinery.
Okay.
Also construction sites where, again, there's loud machinery, there's loud tools. Even though you might be wearing some hearing protection, I don't believe that it stops everything coming through, and it may harm your hearing.
If I worked back in the 80s, does that qualify me? Like, what's the time frame?
Yep. So we understand that there's no time frame. However, there are different legislations. So for any hearing loss before November 1994, it falls under a different scheme, which is a little bit more difficult than the newer scheme for people who may have suffered from an industrial hearing loss after November 1994.
How do I prove it?
So obviously the first thing is an audiogram from an audiologist, which may indicate the industrial loss, and then having obviously the work history. So the insurers often ask for a history of one's employment, and as long as it shows that the environment that they've been working in for those years is a loud environment, as I mentioned as an example, a factory floor, etc., then it may be worth putting in a work of a claim.
Is it a process that I have to sit in front of people and be interrogated?
So it's a relatively straightforward process, and that's where we come in to play to assist with a claim. However, generally, all that is required for a claimant is to see a medico-legal examiner, ENT, ear, nose, throat specialist, who is qualified under the Victorian guidelines to assess somebody for industrial hearing loss.
So can I do this whole process by myself, or do I need a lawyer?
We take out that, I suppose, frustrating and the unknown. We've done many claims in the past, so we know the processes, and we just take that away from a potential claimant who would like to put in a claim.
Can you tell me how much I stand to get?
With a hearing loss claim, you've got two entitlements you can be entitled to. You can obviously look at the medical expenses, and there is also a whole person impairment. To reach that whole person impairment, you need to be assessed at 10%. And depending on what year you last worked, or currently working, if you're still working, there is a table. So for 10%, it depends on when you did.
10% of what?
10% of whole person impairment.
Right.
And yes, it does depend on, as I mentioned, when you did last worked. It goes up in increments every year. So
I've lost 10% of a particular body function or a capability?
So for hearing loss, yes, it is the 10%. It's slightly different for the other physical injuries and psychological injuries, but for hearing loss, it's 10% whole person impairment. And that's, again, assessed by that medico-legal examiner.
How much will this all cost me if I engage your services?
So at Zaparas Lawyers, we operate on a no-win, no-fee. And basically, if we are unsuccessful, you won't have to pay for any of our services. If we are successful in obtaining a lump sum impairment for you, then we will charge solicitor client fees, which we would advise what they would be at the when the insurer provides us with their decision.
And do I get any type of hearing aid?
So the insurer is liable for the reasonable cost of the medical expenses. So the hearing aids, for one example, recommended as the most appropriate hearing aid in our experience. That should be provided or requested from the insurance company. So obviously that's for the audiologist to decide which aid is the best for the injured worker. And should somebody have an accepted claim, all the audiologist needs to do is to put in a request for payment to the insurer once there is an accepted claim.
When is it easy, and when is it not complicated and straightforward, and when does it get complicated?
Well, yes, every matter is different. And yes, any claim for a hearing loss must be against the last employer.
Right.
in our experience. Well, it isn't in the legislation. It has to be against the last known noisy employer. The history side, again, it depends on how many years the injured worker, the claimant, may have worked at the last employer. But the insurer at the end of the day makes that decision as to the claim.
How long does it take, Lucas?
Well, unfortunately, it's taking, from what we've been seeing, it's taking between 8 to 12 months for a claim to be processed.
Right.
Which it's out of everybody's hands. So it used to be a bit quicker, like maybe 4 to 6 months, but now, unfortunately, due to issues with medico-legal examiners, we're finding it a lot harder and a lot longer.
Can you share with us any clients you've had who have been successful? What did they go through? What type of effort did they have to put in?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, it's pretty straightforward, and the involvement of the claimant it can be quite minimal. We start off with obviously needing to fill out some claim forms, so asking a number of questions, and then once the claim is lodged, all it really needs to generally take place is for the person to be assessed by the examiner. So it's really quite minimal.
What are the examples of people who've been successful? What industries do they come from, and what did they go through? And how long did it take for them to be successful?
Yes. So I've had a range, mainly from factory workers.
Any particular industry or a wide range?
Boiler makers, for example, so fitter and turners, who a lot of metal work, construction workers who are around loud, noisy machinery throughout the day. So a wide range. As long as it's been a loud industrial environment, then it may be considered that you've suffered a hearing loss.
And how long did it take for them to have their claim assessed and approved?
Yes. So, as mentioned, between 8 to 10 months or so.
Yeah,
so
right.
It can be, unfortunately, at the moment, it's a long process, but...
I guess if it's hearing and it's life-changing because you can now interact again, it's worth it. How have you seen their lives change?
Basically, better quality of life, I suppose. They're able to not struggle with conversations and any other sort of event where they may have struggled in the past. And also, if they were able to qualify for the whole person impairment, then they would be entitled to a lump sum, and that little bit of extra money can help go a long way with somebody.
And that whole person impairment, could you explain what that means?
They do calculate the loss of hearing, and depending on how severe a person's hearing loss can be, then it may equate to 10% or more. They also do take into consideration age. So in males, they start to deduct a percentage from the age of 55, and then in females from the age of 63, I believe. The percentages are minimal, but if they still qualify for the 10% or more, then they would be entitled to a lump sum.
So your terminology of whole person impairment is they have to take in the whole person and calculate how age and time has affected that hearing loss compared to someone who would naturally suffer that over that time.
Potentially, yes.
Sure.
So they would take into account the work history.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. What if I'm still working?
You can still claim.
Will that affect my job?
Obviously, we can't tell that because we're not too sure.
Yeah, right, right.
I mean, with hearing loss claims, generally people are still able to work. It's just they might need that hearing aid to assist.
Yeah. So, Lucas, if I might still be working or not, I don't really have any other means of paying for my hearing aid, and I might have worked in some sort of construction or factory setting. What do I do? What if that's probably my only option because I can't afford it out of my own means? Where do I go to get your assistance to get this process started?
So we would be happy to have a chat at the very start to discuss if whether or not you may be entitled.
And what are the questions you're going to ask me that first chat?
I always ask about the employment history, their duties, whether they're still working or not. They're the first questions that I do ask, and whether it's been advised that they need hearing aids.
Do I have to see a doctor or an audiologist beforehand?
It makes it a lot easier
Okay.
because we can then review the audiogram report, which indicates the industrial hearing loss. So it's helpful. It can, with the audiogram, it just can help us advise.
You put the results
with
there.
That result.
Yeah, understand, right. Now, if I am living with someone that has a hearing loss, and I know mum or dad worked when they first came to Australia as migrants, and there's many that are in Melbourne in that situation, and they can't speak English. They've got no paperwork. They can't remember who they worked for, or they just know what they did. So is that going to be possible?
As long as we can try and track down their last employer.
What if they've closed down? They're no longer in operations.
If they're closed down, we can still try and lodge it. We can lodge it against
really?
WorkSafe.
Okay.
So it's not all doom and gloom. We can try. It's always worth lodging, especially if the hearing loss was a result of work.
What type of paperwork do you need from me if they've closed down, they don't even exist, there's no website, and you can lodge it against WorkSafe? What do I need to give to you as evidence?
The insurer may ask for some pay slips, or they might even ask for the tax
bank
returns.
Accounts. Yep.
For example, so if we can provide tax returns, that may assist in showing the name of the last employer.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. It's actually quite amazing to know that on that information alone, we can lodge a claim and then take it from there.
Yeah.
Right. And if I don't speak English?
Family member is fine. We can have the family member assist, or we can always have interpreter assist in our appointment. And then even with the medico-legal examination, we would request the insurer to have a interpreter present, and they would assist with the client on the day.
It's amazing to know that is all available in Australia for people who are eligible. And so, once again, if I'm having to see a medical, legal or an ENT, does that cost me anything?
No.
Right,
no.
Okay.
So the beauty of this is that it doesn't cost you anything to put in a claim.
And if I'm rejected, what happens there?
Yeah.
Can I appeal or do it again or go somewhere else? What happens there?
So there is a appeal. You can lodge a request for conciliation through the WIC. It's not too complex. Again, it's completing a request form, and then it would be a bit of a dispute. So it can be quite involved, and that's where we step in, or there may be another body that could potentially assist with that process. But basically, if a claim is rejected, there is that option to dispute it further.
And have you been successful in seeing those disputes overturn claims?
They've been some of them have been rather difficult. I have had an experience where the person did require some hearing aids. We were able to at least get some hearing aids paid for, or part of it paid for.
Right.
So that was one thing. But generally, yes, every case is different. So it's hard to give that sort of guideline. But we would, in the event that a claim is rejected, we would advise of the options, go into conciliation, and then the next steps from there we would obviously advise as well.
You've definitely lifted the apprehension around it. So if I'm sitting at home and I know that I've worked in those environments, do I have anything to lose by giving it a go?
No.
See if I'm eligible.
No, I think as long as you can prove that your hearing loss is a result of of your employment, it may be worth a go. And there's no harm in getting some advice, and then you can decide from there if that's what you wish to do.
Well, if I'm retired, I've got all the time in the world, don't I?
Very true.
Yeah. Lucas, thank you very much. That's a really valuable information for a process that people have found very daunting and the unknown. So, look, we might post your details into our podcast episode.